beautiful downtown Toronto on the polluted shores of filthy Lake Ontario, welcome to the Caribou Club. We have with us tonight a man who makes being a Newfoundlander his career. And here's Harry Hibbs and the Caribou Show Band to tell you all about Ron Pumphrey.
When we talk of Ronnie, baby, Pumphrey is the very best. He wakes up every morning with his stomach on his chest. He tries to talk to everyone, from here to Timbuktu, from Nicky's Roads to come by chance and the folks at Backaroo. Oh, he talks to Mrs. Hanlon, a lovely person at that, and then a prayer from Serenity which really fills the gap. He tries to help the bad and good no matter what they do. I know that up in heaven there will be a place for you. There are policemen, firemen, taxi drivers too, even people down and out are waiting help from you. I know you'll do your very best to help us everyone, and no steer behinds for the things they haven't done. There are people in the party, as we can all assure, Hank Murphy, Elliot Hickman, even Frankie Moore. There's Premier Joe that tops the lot, he's on most every day. Can bet your $1,000 that you'll have them turning grey. There are broken homes and marriages, and even some miscarriages, alcoholics, dope addicts, and hippies and even thieves. Bad men, good men, come from every end, trying to start their lives again with some advice from you. Oh, I had a sense of humor since the day that I was born. I wake up every morning just to hear you blow your horn. I think you are the very best to come from Timbuktu, and lots of happiness ahead for both of you. There are policemen, firemen, taxi drivers too, even people down and out are waiting help from you. I know you'll do your very best to help us everyone, and roast their behinds for the things they haven't done. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful being here. Well, over the years, I've analyzed a lot of Newfoundland humor, and I've discovered that in their humor, Newfoundlanders are cool and witty, honest and smart. Cool, witty, honest, smart. Now, you take cool. Well, if Thomas Edison had been brought up, say, in Petty Harbor, he would have been there working in his home lab trying to invent that electric light which would make an entirely different world. And there he is, working day and night in utter frustration, trying to turn on a light. And now it's the wee hours of the Petty Harbor morning. Months of frustration and effort are behind him, and he connects a couple of wires, and he throws a switch, and all of a sudden, the light comes on, and history has been made. And his mother upstairs taps on the floor and says, Tommy, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Would you put out that damn light and come to bed? And there's the honesty of the Newfoundlander. Take the little girl from Joe Bat's arm who went to Boston in service for a doctor and his wife. Now, they admired this girl and her genuine Newfoundland intelligence, so they sent her to school and taught her the social graces and the fine arts, and she became a wonderful woman. And then tragedy struck. The doctor's wife died. Sometime later, the doctor married this young girl from Joe Bat's arm, and after a couple of years, they sent back home and got her father to visit them. Of course, when he came up to Boston, he was ill at ease with all these sophisticated surroundings. And here he is in the den with his new son-in-law, this unsophisticated, honest fisherman from Joe Bat's arm. The doctor is telling him, I've loved every moment with your daughter. She's made life so beautiful for me. But I'm sorry to say that after 2 years, we've discovered that she just can't have any children. The Newfoundlander looked at the doctor and said, By, that's funny. She had 3 before she left Joe Bat's arm. And you talk about Newfoundlanders being smart. This blind Newfoundlander was on Water Street near Bowerings, and a dog came over. A little dog came over and peed on his shoe and the leg of his pants. And the blind man put his hand in his pocket and he took out a cookie and he gave it to the dog. Now, a Torontonian who'd heard about the stupidity of Newfoundlanders went over and said, "Look, sir, a dog comes over and he pees on you, and you reach into your pocket and you give him a cookie. Why?" The blind man said, "Well, I wanted to find out where his head was so I could kick his blinking ass." But I think the best joke I've heard is about this fellow who wanted to kill Premier Smallwood. He hated him. Now, taking a 12-gauge shotgun inside his coat, he rushes out to the Roaches line, presses the doorbell of the Premier's home. The Premier's wife says, "Sorry, sir, the Premier's having a bath." "Out of my way, woman," he says, and he rushes into the bathroom, and there's the Premier up to his ears in Sunlight soap suds. The guy levels the gun and says, "Smallwood, I'm going to blow your brains out." And with that, the Premier ducks under the water, but his backside comes up, and the guy says, "And that goes for you too, Dr. Rowe." Speaking of Smallwood, the Americans, you know, have Nixon, Johnny Cash, and Bob Hope. And Newfoundlanders have Joey Smallwood, no cash, and very little hope. Well, at least the Americans have fast trains. You know how slow the Newfoundland bullet was. You know, the cross-island train that we had in Newfoundland. Well, this particular woman had come from Port aux Basques en route to St. John's, and when she got about halfway, she told the conductor, "Conductor, I've got to get off this train." And he said, "I'm sorry, lady, we just can't stop the train and let you off." And she said, I've got to get off. I've got to get off. I'm going to have a baby." And he said, "Look it, lady, you shouldn't have gotten on this train in that condition." And she said, "I didn't." You know, my father had 8 children, and he would have had 9, but he read in Time magazine way back in 1942 that every 9th child born into the world is a communist. I've got to tell you this one about a nun from Baie Verte who was transferred to St. John's. She had driven her car nearly all the way through to the city when she ran out of gas. Now, she searched her trunk to find something to put gas in from the gas station about a half-mile down the road. The only thing she could find was a chamber pot. So she got the gas and came back to the car and was pouring the gas into the car from the chamber pot when an Anglican minister came by, stopped the car he was driving, observed the nun with great amazement, and said, "I'm not of your religion, sister, but I sure admire your faith." And not far away from there is a little old lady who sent me in a recipe which I read over the radio and for which I've had many requests. It's called the popcorn dressing recipe, and here's how you make it. Now, first of all, you get yourself your turkey, and then you get 2 cups of diced celery, 2 cups of breadcrumbs, and a half cup of diced onions, a half cup of butter, a half cup of popcorn. Now, you place all the ingredients in a pan, and you mix them well. You add salt, and you add a little bit of sage to your taste. And then you bake the stuffed bird in an oven of 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The dressing is done when the popcorn blows the backside off the turkey. Island Cove is not very far from Bay Roberts, but there's a different type of wit there. I was down on Water Street in St. John's one day when an island cover came over to me and he said, "Cock," he said, "I don't mean to insult you, but are you Ron Pumphrey?" One day a man from Conception Bay got on a train in St. John's to go to Avondale. When the train got as far as Holyrood, he said to the conductor, he said, "Cock, is this Holyrood?" Yes, said the conductor, but it's not Holyrood, it's Holyrood. You dropped your H. "Oh, that's all right, Cock," said the out-harborman. "I'll pick it up again when we gets in Avondale." I'll never forget this particular farmer from Calgary who visited Portugal Cove in Newfoundland, and bragging about the size of his farm, he said, "It's not like this little piece of ground that you call a farm right here," he said to the Portugal Cove man. He said, "My farm is, well, I'll tell you, son. I get into my car at sunup and I start to drive, and I don't reach the other end of my farm until the sun is going down." And the Portugal Cove man looked at him, scratched his chin, and said, "Look, Cock, I had a car like that once and I traded it in." You know, I'm not very good at hunting myself. The first rabbit I ever shot was a duck, and I killed it with a stick. Before Newfoundland became part of Canada, Newfoundland fishermen were fishing in Canadian waters, and this upset the Canadians a great deal. Now, one day, a big Canadian boat stopped a little Newfoundland boat, and the skipper yelled curses and obscenities at the Newfoundlander, accusing the captain of catching Canadian fish. He yelled and he bawled and he stormed. "We're not catching Canadian fish. We're taking Newfoundland fish only. We throw away the Canadian fish," the Newfoundlander said. "Yeah," said the commander of the Canadian fishing boat. "How in the blankety blank can you tell a Canadian fish from a Newfoundland fish?" "Well," said the Newfoundlander, "the Canadian fish are the ones with the big mouths." Speaking of fish, a Newfoundlander was working at Come By Chance, and he was 2 days late for work. And the foreman said, "Fella," he said, "you're late, and I'd like to know why you're late." And the guy said, "Well, it's this way, Cock," he said. "I found a horse mackerel in Conception Bay, and I had to take it to Harbor Grace to get it shot." This fella came to me one day and he said, "Mr. Pumphrey, I saved $2 today." He said instead of getting on the bus coming to St. John's, he ran behind it and he saved $2. "Well," I said, "if you'd run behind a taxi, you would have saved $5. Two Torontonians were moose hunting in Newfoundland, and they were in the wilderness, and they came across a set of tracks. Now, after following the tracks for 8 miles, they finally met a train. And Eufy phoned Air Canada and asked how long it took for a jet to get to Toronto. "Just a second," said the clerk. "That's pretty good, thank you," said the Noof. The plane was on the way from Vancouver to Toronto when the captain said over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just lost one of our engines, but that's okay. We still have 3, but we'll be an hour late." Later on, the captain's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just lost a 2nd engine, but that's okay. We'll easily make it, except we'll be 2 hours late." Not long after, he spoke again. "We've lost the 3rd engine, but don't worry. We still have 1 left. 1 engine will get us in, but we'll be 3 hours late." A Newfoundlander aboard looked at a frightened, white-faced passenger, and he said, "Cock, I hopes he don't lose that last engine, else we'll be up here all night. A Torontonian was telling a Newfoundlander how good an athlete he was. Why, he said, I once ran 30 miles and topped it off by jumping over a 7-foot crossbar. That's nothing, said the Newf. Look at the run you took. A Newfie in a Toronto employment office said he could do any kind of a job, anything at all. All right, do you have any papers, the clerk asked. Lots of papers, said the Newf, if you got the backy. This Montrealer came down to St. John's, and he went into Barney's restaurant. And he said, do you have any Newfoundland food? And the chef said, well, I'll tell you what we do have. We have cod tongues. Would you like to try some cod tongues? And the Montrealer turned up his nose and he said, look, he said, I wouldn't eat anything that comes out of anything's mouth. And the Newfoundlander said, how about an egg then? Ray Kent and I were out the other night down in Yonge Street, and we dropped into a tavern where we saw a Torontonian betting a Newfoundlander $50 he couldn't drink 15 beers in a row without stopping. And the Newfoundlander walked outside, but he came back in 10 minutes, and he said, okay, the bet is on, he said. He drank the beers in no time flat and collected the $50. One thing, Newfie, said the Torontonian, he said, why did you go outside that time? Newfoundlander said, I wasn't sure I could do it, so I went to the tavern next door to try it first. A Newfoundland priest arrived at a hotel in Toronto, and immediately the bellhop picked up his 4 suitcases and put them in the elevator, and at the 4th floor he picked up the bags, struggled to the room, opened the door, laboriously lifted the bags onto the bed, turned on the air conditioning, adjusted the coloring of the television, and switched on the light, and just stood around waiting for you know what. And the priest politely told him he didn't have any change, and then he asked the bellhop, he said, do you drink? And the bellhop said, I sure do, Reverend, I sure do. Well, okay, said the priest, you kneel down and I'll give you the pledge. Ray Kent and I, on the way to the Caribou Club here, passed through Jarvis Street, and we passed the harbor lights, which reminded me of this particular case of a Newfoundlander going down to the harbor lights here in Toronto and asking the Salvation Army officer, he said, officer, he said, do you save bad women? Oh, yes, certainly, said the Salvation Army officer. Den, said the Newfie, save me one for Saturday night. I remember this fellow who went to the Basilica to confession. He went to the priest, and there in the confessional, and he said, Father, he said, Father, yes, said the priest. He said, Father, he said, I laughed at a priest. And the priest said, was it I? Yes, Father. Yes, Father, it was you. Well, son, why? Well, Father, you're singing at Mass on Sunday. It was horrible. Well, said the priest, how much money did you put in the collection plate? Oh, 5 cents, Father. Well, what did you expect for 5 cents? Harry Hibbs? This Torontonian walked into a Water Street tavern, and he had a pig under his arm. And the bartender said, where did that come from? And the pig said, I found him down in Steers Cove. Well, down in Bonavista, this particular woman was in bed with her husband. She woke up in the middle of the night with a terrible pain in her stomach, and she said, Joshua, she said, will you go downstairs and go in the kitchen and take off the wall the picture of me saint and bring it up and put it on my stomach and cure my stomach ache? So he said, all right, maid, he said, and he went down to the kitchen mad as crackers and grabbed the picture off the wall, brought it up, gently gave it to her, and she laid it on her stomach, and she gave a sigh of relief, and in 2 minutes she was dead asleep. And the next morning she said, Joshua, me saint never lets me down. I just put it on me belly, and in just a couple of minutes, and all me pain went, and I went to sleep. And he said, oh, that's very good. He said, give it to me, and I'll go down and hang it up. So he took it, and he was just about to leave the bedroom, and he glanced at it, and he said, good God, this is Rossie Barber. A Newfoundlander was seen jumping up and down on a manhole cover in Toronto saying, 87, 87, 87, 87. And a Torontonian came by and he said, what's that goofy noofy doing, jumping up and down on that manhole cover saying 87, 87, 87? So he went over to him and he said, hey, Noof, he said, and there was a big crowd around, a big crowd. And the guy said, hey, Noofy, he said, what are you doing there? Well, said the Newfoundlander, you just stand on this here cover. He said, you stand on the cover and you try it, and you'll see. So the Torontonian got on the manhole cover, and he jumped up. And when he did, the Newfoundlander hauled away the manhole cover, and the Torontonian went down, and he shoved back the cover, 88, 88, 88. Now, I swear that this is true. Jim Hickey is an enterprising man at Holyrood, just outside St. John's. And he looks after maternity cases, marriage feasts, and funerals. Now, he has a big, bold sign outside his door which advertises all this, and it simply says, hatching, matching, and dispatching. A Montrealer went out fishing with a Newfoundlander, and they caught a lot of codfish. And the Newfoundlander said, you better mark this spot, he said, so as we'll know where to fish tomorrow. So the Montrealer marked the side of the boat with a piece of chalk. Gosh, you're stupid, said the Newfoundlander. He said, you're stupid, we mightn't be using this boat tomorrow. A St. John's businessman swears he actually did this. And knowing him, I believe it. He couldn't get a customer to pay his bill, so he wrote this letter to him. He said, Dear Mr. Smith, after checking our records, we've concluded that we've done more for you than your mother did. We carried you for 15 months. The late Joe Fitzgibbon was a little leprechaun of a city councilor, a beloved individual, and he was as Irish as they come. Now, one day an Orangeman threatened him, and Joe looked up at him, and he said, look, he said, if you do that again, I'll have the bishop bless Windsor Lake, and you'll be drinking holy water the rest of your life. Well, Nellie and I will be going home tomorrow via Halifax. And every time I think of Halifax, I think of the Lord Nelson Hotel. And every time I think of the Lord Nelson Hotel, I think of George from Crinkle Cove. Now, George from Crinkle Cove was written by P.J. Wakeham of St. John's, and hundreds of requests came into the radio station for this particular composition. And you'll be glad to hear it, I know. It's a letter from a dear son during World War II. A letter from George from Crinkle Cove. Dear Mama and Dadda, here I is over in Germany where the war is at, and I wished I was back in Crinkle Cove where I was born and reared. Now I'm writing this letter slow-like because I knows you can't read fast. I've learned a whole lot since I left home, and I'm now going to give you some information about my experiences. When I got off at the train in Halifax, there was this queer-looking feller with TAXI writ across the front of his cap. And he comed up to me and he said, "Lord Nelson, sir?" And I said, "Gracious, no, I'm George from Crinkle Cove." Then I was taken down to a big building they calls a barracks, bigger than the schoolhouse back home. And the next day I was called into the office by the officer, who asked me, "How far did you go in school?" And I said, 4 miles, sir. Then he said, "Don't you try to act smart with me," he said, "or I'll have you up before the captain." "Was you ever up before the captain?" And I said, "I don't know, sir. What time does the captain get up?" Then the officer made fun of me talk, and he said, "Where did you learn to talk like that, feller?" And I said, "Goodness gracious, officer, I learned to talk like that back in Crinkle Cove." "My boy," said the officer, "don't you know the Queen's English?" And I said, "Is she, sir? I didn't know that." And then the officer asked me if I had my intelligence test yet, and I said, "Yes, sir, officer." And he said, "Do you know how to make antifreeze?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'd steal her underwear." Then the officer said to me, he said, "I didn't think I'd improve very much when I goes overseas." And I said, "No, sir, I don't think I will, because I've heard that the weather isn't much good for growing over there, although I'm only 20. After a full month of writing and lefting and turning, we was put on board a truck, and the officer said we was going overseas. When we was marching down to the ship, the officer in charge had a stoppage in his speech, and before he could say "halt," after crowd walked right over the stage head. Finally, we got on board the boat. We wasn't at sea very long when I got sick to me stomach, and I was standing by the rail when the officer come up to me and he said, "Whose company is you in?" And I said, "Officer, can't you see I'm in nobody's company?" And he asked, "Is the captain up yet?" And I said, "If I ain't, he is." The next day, I was talking to one of the ship's officers, and he said, "There goes 8 bells. It's my watch below." And I said, "Goodness gracious, sir, does your watch strike as loud as that?" And he said, "Man, you've got a lot to learn yet." And I said, "Yes, sir, that's what my teacher told me back in the schoolhouse in Crinkle Cove." Now, after a week or more at sea, we finally reached France. And then I heard the captain say, "We've dropped anchor." And I said to him, "I knowed you was going to do that, sir. It was hanging over the bow all the way over." When we landed in France, we was taken in trucks and driven a long ways into the country. And I thought I was going moose hunting for a while. And finally, we was put off at a large farm. Dad, there was more than 20 cows there. What a place to get a feed of beef. I was standing outside the barn one day when the officer asked, "Can you milk a cow?" "Good Lord, yes, sir," I said. "I always milked Biddy. That was Uncle George's cow back home." "All right then, soldier," the officer said. "You get busy and milk those cows." So I got the bucket, and I was doing a real good job when this lady come along and said, "Soldier, why ain't you at the front?" And I said, "Goodness gracious, lady, you knows you can't milk a cow at the front." Then she said, "I suppose you're too stupid to be sent there." And I said, "Good Lord, no, ma'am. I'm as straight as a whip when I'm stood up." Then one night, one of the boys explained about a pain in his high. And they took him to the doctor, and the doctor said he had a Cadillac on it. And they took him to the hospital, and when they got him in the alligator, he went out in a comet. Finally, the day came for us to go to the front. And the officer said, when we goes into battle, it's every man for himself, fire at will. And I turned to the officer and I said, officer, I knowed we come over here to fight, and to fight a big battle, sir. But I didn't know that we had to call out their names like Tom and Dick and Harry and Will before we shot at them. Then the officer said, by that I means you will use discretion. And I said, yes, sir. There's a deep one off there to the left. There could be thousands of enemy down there. Then one night we had to make a hurried retreat. We was roaring down the grade when the brakes give out and the truck jumped over and rolled over a dozen or more times. I saw the moon about 12 times, and everybody on it were killed except me. Now, the next morning, I was called into the captain's office, and he asked what happened, and he said, the truck rolled over? And I said, yes, sir. And then the officer asked me what I did after that, and I said, when I come to, sir, I kicked the truck off me. Then the officer said, you must be tough. And I said, no, sir, Tough was killed in the accident. I'm George from Crinkle Cove. Then the officer said, are there any more like you back home? And I said, maybe 15 or 20 men, sir, but you'll have to wait till October or November before you can get any men from Crinkle Cove, sir. They's all fishing on the Labrador this summer. And then there was this last experience I had one day. I think I'll tell you about it. I saw a big plane shot down, and when it struck the ground, it dug a trench in about 2 minutes that would take all the men in Crinkle Cove to dig in about 3 months. The pilot was killed. Hope this letter finds you the same. I'm your loving son, George. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Now, before I go, I want to tell you, you're in this beautiful Caribou Club here. Hundreds of you, up in the balconies, on the floor, peeping in the doorways down there. And do you know how it all started? You know Ray Kent, eh? Ray Kent is how it all started. And it all began when a bunch of Newfoundlanders, including Ray, were playing hockey on Bay of Islands one day, and Ray got a breakaway up the St. Lawrence River. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Well, that's it. Good night, God bless, and long may your big jib draw.
Ronnie boy, the folks to folks are waiting from shore to shore and all around the bay. When morning comes and people they are listening for you to start and hear what you to say, but you do more to help distressed and lonely with your wise words and counseling so kind. A little wind which spawns with some humor, which helps us all to have a broader mind. So keep it on, body and your fine station, with your strong voice and that of the common man. To when the island is liberation, so for a song, just let me shake your hand. Oh, Ronnie boy, the folks are waiting from shore to shore and all around the bay. When morning comes and people they are listening for you to start and hear what you've to say, for you to start and hear what you've to say.